Hey, it's Jason Cunningham and welcome back to Save My Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners navigate through the proverbial shitstorm. Now, today's guest is a bit of a rock star himself, or potentially the man behind the scenes. Good friend of the firm, great client, and just all-round good guy. And his name is Jaddan Comerford, and along with his wife, Rachel Tulloch, have a music empire known as Unified Music Group. Jaddan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm really good, pal. Great to have you, mate. One of the things that attracts me to you in a purely platonic sense, and I know that sort of got you a little bit excited, but one of the things that attracts me to you is the energy that you bring into the room, and more importantly, your humility. And without disrespecting your industry, humility is not high on the radar of the music manager and music promoter. And I guess for mine, we'll talk about some of the clients that you manage and some of the things that you do. And I'm really keen to reach out to you to find out a bit more about the collaborative work that you guys do. And that's one of the things that I love about your industry is collaboration is such an important aspect to it. You can't do it on your own. The artist can't do it on his or her own. You can't do it on your own. But when I've been to your office and the way you guys work together, but also the other collaborative projects that you've built along the journey, I find them nothing short of outstanding. But before we get to that, young man, and I know you're coming up to your 20-year anniversary, which is pretty exciting. Tell me this, what went through a young Jaden Comerford's mind to set up this music business?
Well, to be honest with you, when I got started, I was only 17. Yeah. So I started a record label called Boomtown Records. And I was going into university at Victoria University over in Footscray.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was a hobby. I didn't think that it was going to be something that would have me sitting here with you, almost 20 years later. But yeah, it happened. And one thing led to another, and here I am. So really at the time, it was just something that seemed like a good thing to do. And I guess a bunch of naivety kind of played into my favor, and I managed to keep the lights on for this long.
So that's a pretty cool story. So you started your business at 17 at university.
Yep.
And it was called Boomtown Records.
Boomtown Records, yeah.
Cool name. And so what degree did you do?
I did a music industry degree. It was a business degree majoring in music industry. And so it was pretty cool because it allowed me to get a lot of exemptions from certain coursework because I was running a record label.
Oh, right.
But I've often said the difference between having a record label and not having a record label is actually just saying you have a record label. And you could insert any business there. But the reality is one day I just woke up and said, I have a record label. And so I started approaching bands. And because I said I had a record label and I had a logo that had the word records in it, people started giving me their records.
Okay, so you're a 17, 18-year-old kid at university getting exemptions from your course because you've got a record label.
Yeah.
Who's the first artist that you signed?
The first band that I ever signed was a band from the southeastern suburbs called Wishful Thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But it was in my last year of university that I signed a band called Behind Crimson Eyes. Mm-hmm. And it was around the time, it was like 2006, and emo was really big. Right. And all these big emo bands were coming from America. And Behind Crimson Eyes were kind of the Australian answer to that. And so without really realizing it, I'd sort of signed this band that was on the cusp of becoming quite big, at least quite big in the scope of the record label was run by a 19-year-old kid who was working in his bedroom in his parents' house, So literally in March following graduation, the record came out and it got into the charts and all this sort of stuff. And next thing I knew, I had enough money coming in to be able to sort of not go and get a real job and actually just go, okay, well, this is going to be my job, and went from there.
I find it amazing that, you're signing bands and artists when you're not even old enough to go into the pub to watch them, to watch them play. Okay, so you've never really worked for anyone else then, I take it?
No, like through university, I had some warehouse jobs and drove a delivery truck for Harry the Hirer for a while. True story. But otherwise, I've just I've been an entrepreneur, founder, and bootstrapped my entire journey.
Tell me, where does that come from? Is it got anything to do with your family of origin? Were your parents business owners? Or
Yeah, mum and dad. Dad was a plumber,
mm-hmm.
and so him and mum owned a business, a plumbing business, and that was sort of like how I knew that the family made a living. But then, and I actually quite liked, I like telling this story because I have two brothers, one older, Dan, and one younger, Aaron, and we all went to St. Kevin's College.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, a plumber's wage wasn't going to put 3 kids through St. Kevin's College. And at the time, my dad was doing a job at a kindergarten somewhere in Melbourne, and he was chatting to the lady at reception, and I don't know what he was telling her, but basically she said, well, if you're looking for business opportunities, my husband's about to launch a business. You should talk to him, and maybe it might be something you're interested in. And it was Baker's Delight.
Oh, wow.
And so I remember this scene. It was like they were sitting in the kitchen at home, like Roger Gillespie, Leslie Gillespie, mum and dad. And we were like Huey, Dewey and Louie, like looking around the corner. And a year later, my dad's a baker and he's owning Baker's Delight stores. And I told this story at his 60th birthday because he did that just so we could go to the school that he thought we should go to. Yeah. And guess what he did the year after my little brother graduated from that school?
Sold the business?
Yeah, and became a plumber again.
Yeah.
Now he's a plumbing teacher at TAFE. Anyway, I digress, but
that gave me goosebumps. That's a really good story. And Roger and Leslie Gillespie, I know them, and I've done some work with them. And out of all the franchise businesses that I've worked with, most of the franchisees love those guys because they are really focused on helping the franchisee do really well.
Yeah. So I learned something from that
So was it Leslie Gillespie that she was at the kindergarten and she said, my husband, are you
I hope every bit of that is 100% factual, but that's the story that I recall. It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But for me, I guess that gave me this sense of, there's a bunch of things that I extract from that. If you want to do something, do it. Look after your family, be honest, like work hard, have goals, all that sort of stuff. Like, so I really think I extracted the learnings that I took from watching that as a young person, I think I've really put into my business and my life.
That's a couple of good points there. If you want to do something, just go out and do it.
Yeah.
And the second thing is look after your family.
Yeah. Simple. Yeah. Start a record label and look after your family.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Jason Records.
And all I need is to have a little record on the album cover, on the logo, and I'm away. So you jump out, you leave university, you sign this cool emo band. They get an album that launches in March the following year. And all of a sudden, you're in the industry. You're 20 years old, you're wet behind the ears. And your peers are 25 and 30 years older than you, with a lot more experience than you and a lot more money than you had. How was that? How did that feel?
Yeah, it was definitely a journey. And I think for me, one of the benefits, not only was I young, but I'd also picked out a niche part of the industry. So I grew up and I still listen to punk music and hardcore and metal, and this is kind of what I like. So I'm playing with this music that the big companies weren't really that interested in, even to the point where Warner Music at one point spotted what we were doing, and they started paying us to help them promote their big bands, like their bands like Green Day and Paramore and Panic at the Disco, all these big emo bands coming and punk bands coming out of America. So we had this really nice little niche that I could kind of grow. And it really wasn't until quite a few years later when we started working with people like Illy and Vance Joy that people were like, it's that guy. It's the guy that wears black T-shirts. And it's like, he's really nice.
Yeah.
Like, and so that was probably one of the best things. I had this really good training ground to kind of to operate in my own place, build my own community, work with the people I wanted to work with, and spent close to 10 years of the first part of my career in that world.
And as you progressed and got more experience and got your chocks up and started to, as you said, sign the Illys of this world and Vance Joys of this world, no doubt your street cred would have elevated, and you've got to mix with Gadinsky and all these sorts of guys. Tell me what that's like, without telling me secrets behind the curtain, so to speak, but tell me what's that like to rub shoulders with those sorts of people and some of the people that they represent.
Yeah, well, I guess growing up, I always wanted to be in the music business, like from quite a young age.
Are you a music like? Are you a wannabe rock star yourself? I say that respectfully because I am.
I played music at school.
Yeah,
and I only just at the beginning, actually, because my birthday's in February, so in February my wife bought me a guitar. But it was the first time since I was at school that I'd had a guitar at home. So no, the rock star dream left a long time ago. We had a neighbour, David Hirschfelder. He's a screen composer. He's made music for some of Australia's most biggest films, like Australia. And he was our next door neighbour. And so all these things are serendipitous, right? So we were living in Eaglemont, and Mum and Dad were doing their thing with the bakeries and the initially plumbing. And the next door neighbor was a piano player who made music for films, and same family makeup as in the kids and the size of the house. And I was always like, what is this? How does this guy make a living? And then one day we were over there all hanging out, and this other guy turns up, and we're like, who's this guy? It's his manager. I was like, okay. I'm like 12 years old, just sitting there, probably like eating ice cream, thinking, oh yeah, I'll put that in my little note.
Yeah, as you're drafting up a business plan at 13.
Exactly, career opportunity. But so I was always aware of the industry, and then I read a lot about different, more books are written on the American and English industry people, but I've read a lot about the industry. So when I finally got to the point where I met Kadinsky, for example, I had lunch with him in Turak at a Japanese restaurant. I was just like, wow. I arrived probably an hour early and sat in the car, just like getting myself ready. But, we now have a business together. We have a publishing company together, which we started 8 years ago, and have signed a lot of artists together. So now it's normal, and a lot of these people, they're friends and peers. But yeah, back in the day, it was frightening trying to get to know these people.
One of the things that I really like about you, Jaddan, is that you don't fit the mold, right? And when I first met you, and you're a great client of our firm, and Davo, one of my partners, looks after you guys. And you told me about your love of heavy metal and, hard rock. And, the first album I ever bought was Kill 'Em All by Metallica. Right?
Nice.
And so I'm a big Metallica fan, and then got into Slayer and Anthrax and all that sort of stuff. And I don't look like a typical heavy metal fan. So you don't look like a headbanger, nor do you look like or behave like the whole music industry. As I said, you're so polite, you are so humble, and you're warming, and you always give the person in the room your ear, which I think is a great quality. And then, I met James, Vance Joy. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say his name. Or
That's right.
Yeah. So I met James, and you guys are like two peas in a pod. Both you're not the shortest blokes I've met, but he is quite a, I'm really big on your family of origin. I think that's got a real big impact to who we become. And now my role as a parent, I'm very conscious of the lessons that I'm teaching my kids, both directly and indirectly. But the one thing I remember about both yourself and James when you were here with Brad is I walked into the boardroom and you both stood up. And that old school gentlemanly like behaviour, I think it can't be lost. And it's just a sign of respect. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And sorry to bore you with that.
No, it's awesome. And James is, he's one of the best, and he's one of Australia's most successful talents that we've ever seen. And he's only partway through his career, but yeah, he's one of the nicest people I've ever worked with, and it's an absolute pleasure to work with him.
Yeah, and he's kicking ass.
Yeah,
and he's got a magnificent head of hair too. Anyway, that's a real side point. So let's fast forward to where your business is today, and a couple of things that I want to talk about. How many team members do you have in your organisation now?
There's 55 people at the company.
Yeah, 55. And it started with one 17-year-old kid walking into Footscray Uni, or VU is Footscray, which is awesome. So you guys are arguably probably the biggest independent music management business in Australia, would you say?
We're one of, yeah.
Well, if I say it, it doesn't mean you're lying. You've got your own label, you've got a printing or screen printing business, you're involved with music festivals, you're managing artists, you've got your 2400, which is your online merch store, which is one of the biggest going around town, is what I'm hearing or I'm saying.
What are you saying?
If I say it, it's true, Jaddan.
Correct.
So you've got all these pieces of the pie going on. And that intrigues me, and I'll tell you for why. When you first spoke about the journey of you going into the business, you said, Jay, we niched up and we were into the emo sort of space, and we were real niche. And that's what got our foot in the door, and we were winning business from Warner and Mushroom and these guys, or whoever that was referring because we were niche. Fast forward 20 odd years, and I say this respectfully, you don't seem niche. You seem to have fingers in many pies, and I know it's working for you because we're your accountant. What do you think the secret to that success is?
Yeah. Well, Rachel coined the term organic evolution. Mm-hmm. So we've never sat down in the boardroom with a spreadsheet and go, we really need to get into this industry, or we really need to move into this sector. That conversation has never happened. And that doesn't mean we don't have a plan. It's more like we'll all of a sudden be wandering along the path, and we're like, someone goes, oh, do you guys want to buy a screen printing company? And we'll be like, well, we have an online store. We manage all these artists. We run all these tours, all these festivals. Do the maths and go, well, we can just fill up the pipeline with our own work. So yeah, let's buy it.
Yeah.
But so I guess the point is everything has evolved organically. Mm-hmm. And so we still are niche in some ways. We're still independent. We still do a lot of work in that punk emo space. That's still like a really big part of what we do. But ultimately, everything has evolved in order to serve the business. So yeah, like I said, the artists print with the printing company. The printing company stocks the online store. The merchandise gets sent to the festival. It all just plays off each other.
Yeah, it all works together.
Yeah.
Can you tell me the importance of, I mean, that makes a lot of sense now that you think about it. You're your own supply chain, really, if you think about it. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And also what it does is, because this is one thing that I'm really big on, and people like Brad will tell me that, you know, maybe you could be more firm, but like we never have a hard and fast rule like you have to use all services. We actually do the opposite. I say to all the heads of all the different services, you need to win the work.
Yeah.
You know, because if we have to force that business to work with all of them and one of them slips up, it hurts all of us.
Doesn't it?
Equally, if we just print the T-shirts for someone or we just have them on the festival or whatever, it actually opens up our funnel to be so much wider. So when you actually look at all the businesses and all the clients we work with, it's exponentially bigger than if we tried to serve all of them at once.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. What I also enjoy about your business model and I guess your approach as a leader, yours and Rachel's approach as leaders, is the notion of collaboration. You know, and the boys, I keep thinking of their names, Run to the Hills. That's only because it's an Iron Maiden song. And again, we go back to the
Hills Are Alive.
Yeah, Hills Are Alive. Yeah, those boys. And they're doing the festivals, and that started off, and I think on their parents' farm or something like that. And again, that sort of, you know, you get the festival going, you get the artist who goes to it all works. Tell me, how do you work, being somebody that has built quite a very big and strong and powerful business with a great brand? How do you go letting go when you collaborate with others? Tell me, how does that work, and how do you engage with other people in the other businesses that you have a share in?
For sure. Yeah, so we own the core business, but yeah, we have a number of partnerships, and the Hills Are Alive relationship. So it was two brothers, Aiden and Rhett McLaren. So their parents are friends with my parents. That's how we met.
Oh, wow.
We literally met through our parents. And so they were running their events on their family farm. And Luke, who has been with the company for 15 years coming up, he said to me, we need to start a festival. I was like, okay, why is that? Coming back to the organic evolution. So there used to be a festival called Soundwave that brought out a lot of the really big rock metal bands. And Soundwave was an amazing festival. One thing it didn't really cater for, it didn't book many Australian artists. And as an Australian company, that really put a bean up on it.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe it was one day after Luke had, you know, failed once again to get a certain act on the festival, he just stormed into my office and he's like, stuff this, we're starting our own festival. And I was like, all right, well, you should call Aiden. You know, they got their farm and we'll just like figure it out. And that was basically how that idea was born. And we launched the Unify Festival. But I don't know. I think the thing for me is I've always had this theory of if you try to control everything, you're going to run out of hours in a day. Whereas if you can sit back and let things happen, it's like that old saying, I think Reid Hoffman says it, like, let fires burn. You got to know the difference between like a bit of kindling and like a forest fire in order to have that approach. Yeah. And it definitely has bit me in the butt sometimes. Yeah. But if you let go and let other people try to do things, you're going to get more done, and eventually you're going to win because you're going to build trust, you're going to build relationships, and you're going to create more opportunities. So yeah, that's definitely how I look at it.
I want to go a bit deeper on that if I can,
please.
Because a lot of people listening to this podcast are leaders in businesses, and might have business partners or are running their own show really well, but tend to have this notion of being a control freak, if you like. Now, and that may have worked for them to a point in time. I want to go a bit deeper in, do you set boundaries? So let's say we go on the notion that we let fires burn.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have some rules of engagement or what your expectations are? How do you let someone go and start a festival? Hey, ring my mate, the McLaren brothers, right, who've got a farm up north, and just, I mean, surely it wasn't just that and then they went and did it. There was a bit more involved in that. Tell me how that works and how the think tank approach works.
Yeah. Well, I think how it happened then and how it happens now is probably different. And I think back then we probably even light our own forest fires back then, to be honest with you. Nowadays, like, Unified's pretty structured. You've met Matt Rogers, who's our chief operating officer. We've got Amy, who's our head of HR, Andrew in finance. We've got a really strong, structured team. We have a leadership team that governs the leadership strategy of the group and how we sort of want to work together. One thing we've been doing a lot lately is just trying to move slowly when we're making decisions and making sure we're actually looking at every single part of a situation before we actually make a decision.
That's a really important point. Can I just jump across you and just share with you can see the delight in my face. It's often said that we spend more time buying a $300 pair of jeans than we do buying a $300,000 house.
Yeah.
Right? And the same thing happens in business. Sometimes we screw around with a little decision as to whether we should buy 3 or 4 laptops, and we jump into bed quickly with a big, broad decision.
Yeah.
And so you've made that as part of your strategic plan that we're going to take things slowly.
Yeah, and I think you got to think quickly about how you're going to let it onto the agenda.
Yeah.
Like you might say, hey, Jaden, do you want to buy a shoe company? And I'll probably say no. But if you said, do you want to buy a shoe company that they partnered with this music festival, something, not the best example, but, I might say, okay, let's get that on the agenda. We'll go and we'll workshop it and we'll come back to you. You need to know when to think quick and think slow. But that's something that I've found, particularly through COVID, has been really important because it's been, I think especially because we've been not in the same room for most of the time, we've had to get better at communicating.
Yeah.
So we've had to give things the time it needs to do the due process to make those decisions. I think I might have jumped off your question though about collaboration.
Yeah,
we kind of got off point there. But I think one thing for me, and this is where COVID's actually worked really well for me, is I guess I haven't decided whether it's repetition or consistency. I think consistency is the more positive sounding word. I love a weekly meeting. Yeah. I'm all about it.
Yeah.
I actually love a daily meeting if the topic is important enough.
Yeah.
And
why do you love it?
Consistency.
Yeah,
it's like going to the gym. It's like going for a run. It's like learning Spanish, or you've got to be. If you want to get good at something, you've got to be consistent. And so, if you and I had an idea and we sat down every Tuesday at 9:00 for the next year and talked about it, that idea would be so good at the end of that.
Yeah.
And so, I've got weekly meetings that have been going for years. And so, for example, with the McLaren brothers, every Thursday we have a 1-hour meeting and we talk about our business. And so you build the trust. You can stay on top of things that's it's such a simple thing, but that is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, one of your secrets to your success. It's interesting. Consistency, you're right, can apply across so many aspects of your life.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Whether it is training and exercise. And I know, yourself, when you're on a roll and you're exercising every day or 5 or 6 times a week, and then you just drop off one week, it's hard to get back on. Yeah. But it's not just how you collaborate with your business partners, but it's also how you engage with your team members.
Yep.
And if you are not, and it's also, and I look at it as a parent, if you're inconsistent as a parent, your child is confused, irrespective whether the child's 3 or 18. It gets confused. And the same thing happens, I've found, with your team members.
Yep.
That the moment you stop something like that, they're like, why aren't you doing this anymore?
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that may exist in your business, and I'll address the elephant in the room, is that the 2 owners of the organisation are also married. And that in itself scares the life out of a lot of people. How do you navigate through that?
Rach and I being married and running a business together?
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting. It makes for a pretty full 24-hour cycle kind of life. What it also made for when we were out of COVID, because we've spent a lot of time living in the States and traveling. So for example, last Northern summer, Rach was on the tour in Europe with Vance Joy and Pink from the start of June through till the end of September. I was there for the first 2 weeks, but then after that I was, this here, there and everywhere. And so we didn't see each other for 2.5 months, and that was 5 years into our marriage. So we I think it works well because we're constantly moving around and doing different things. We often use the term divide and conquer. But when we're all in the office, I don't know. I love it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's cool.
And COVID's been a great time for us to actually hang out. We've had dinner together every night for the last 9 months.
Yeah, wow.
That's more consistency than I've ever had in my life with Rach.
Yeah. Your attitude and aptitude is outstanding, and it's quite infectious. Listening to you talk is quite infectious, and I really want to keep down this path, but I just got to ask you one question. What's Pink like?
Pink? Yeah. I didn't spend that much time with her, but she's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I saw her play 2 nights at Wembley Stadium in London. It's 75,000 people a night, 150,000 people just to come to see Pink. The same weekend as Glastonbury too.
Yeah, wow.
So from what I got from it and from what I heard from James, like Vance Joy, absolute legend.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a rock star as a kid, right? And I guess as a 47-year-old kid, I still want to be a rock star. The challenge is I have absolutely no rhythm and I cannot sing. But just the energy from the stage, I mean, I would love that. That would be like heroin times 1,000. Not that I have had heroin, but just the energy of 70. Like I know when I go to the footy, right? I'm an Essendon supporter. I know you're a Collingwood supporter. But Anzac Day, you go to the Anzac Day game of footy, and if you do it right and you get up and you catch the train into Flinders Street Station, you go across the road to Y&J's and you smack a couple of pots down and you walk down to the MCG, and you get into that cauldron and the energy of 100,000 and pretty much 50,000 barrack for the Bombers and 50,000 barrack for the Magpies. That energy, that is electric, right? And so I when I go to a concert, and I haven't been to too many concerts. I've been to a few Metallica concerts and Iron Maiden and a few of these sorts of things. I went to Jimmy Barnes, I think, and stuff like that. But it's just the energy. I imagine being up on stage and just sucking that energy. You could just light 1,000 light bulbs, I reckon.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Imagine doing that every night, or multiple nights a week. It'd be pretty exhilarating.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to your leadership style, and I like to coin the phrase the overnight success that took you about 18 years.
It was a long night.
Yeah, it was. But there was a lot of consistency, and repetition. Your mindset intrigues me. The way you approach life. So I've had conversations with many a business owner in this room and over Zoom about how COVID impacted them, right? And I've had many a conversation with business owners from my office, talking to people at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night that have been getting smashed with being locked down and all that sort of stuff. And I go to you, how's lockdown? You go, lockdown's been great for us. And I find that interesting. And I want to know, surely, what's your secret that you do there? Do you do a lot of work self-development wise? Are you into meditation? How do you remain so level-headed in a crazy world, which is the world that you're in?
I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of yoga. I do a lot of study in philosophy and that sort of stuff. So I do spend a lot of time thinking and thinking and learning how to think better, basically. Yeah. So look, I'm not perfect, obviously, and I have my moments, but I do put a lot of work into trying to be the best I can be.
Okay, so on the surface, right, and I'm not trying to navigate, on the surface that sounds fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So here I am talking to a bloke who loves meetings, who has meetings upon meetings, who works pretty hard. You've got a team of 55, 60 people around you. You manage a lot of musicians, and some of them can be quite demanding. I'm not saying James is like that, but no doubt there's some egos involved, no doubt at all. I mean, this is the pot calling the kettle black. No, so there's no doubt there's a bit of ego involved. So you've got to manage that. I know your industry is not a 9-to-5 industry, yet you still manage to find the time to meditate, practice yoga, and learn how to think better. How do you do that? Do you prioritize your time? Explain to me how you do that.
Yeah, it's a huge priority. I get up at 5:30, which isn't that early. I want to get up earlier, but at the moment it's 5:30. And I make time the first sort of 90 minutes of the day of mine as far as just sort of doing work on myself.
So what does that involve?
It's a bunch of meditation, breath work, physical yoga, reading, journaling, and then cooking, just to sort of like set the mood for the day with good food and stuff like that. Yeah. It's I guess because all that stuff to me, it's lifestyle. It's not like I've got to do this so I can do that. It's actually just part of life. Yeah. Because for me, like I love business, and part of running business is making money. But like for me, because I mentioned earlier, I bootstrapped this entire operation. And now as an investor myself, as someone who has angel investments in, 10 plus businesses, I kind of look at it now and go, why didn't I ever raise money? Why did I do it this way? Yeah. And the answer to that question is pretty complex, but the point is I've had a weird relationship with money for a long time because I was always chasing what I thought was success. And when I got to that point where I was like, firstly, I either don't need any more money or this chase for money actually isn't getting me more money. Yeah. I was like, well, there's got to be more to this, right? And so for me, running the business and the meetings, we can replace. It's not that I love meetings; I love people. I love connecting with the people that I work with and having that weekly meeting to be able to check in and catch up. So for me, the meditation and the stuff that I do in the morning it sets the mood for me to be able to do what I do through the day. And what I do through the day, it's not really a job. It's actually just what I enjoy doing. I know that might sound weird, and some people will say, "Oh, how do you do work-life balance?" And I don't really like that kind of comment or that statement. I think that it's almost like some people need it, but for what I do, I don't need it because I don't want to have a rule where I have to stop at this time or stop doing this at that time. Like I want to be able to be available. Like one of my staff needed to talk at 10 o'clock on Monday night, and it's like, let's talk.
Yeah.
You know, like they needed me, so I was there.
So it's a cool attitude. I know I'm having conversations with my wife at the moment. She's looking to return to the workforce. She's an accountant. We met at university, and I sort of told her a few lies, told her my father had money and this, that, and the other, and sort of convinced her to marry me. 28 years later, here we are, and she's when our third son, we have twin boys, Lewis and Jack, who are 18, and our youngest son, Tom, is 13. And so Ange decided to forgive or put her career on hold whilst she focused on being a homemaker. And she's looking to return back into the fold. The problem is she doesn't like accounting. And she said, and that's fair enough because, a lot of people don't like accounting. And she said, Jay, but, I'm a bit envious of you because you love your job. And I guess I'm similar to you in the fact that I try to create or design a job and design a career that I enjoy. And there's parts of my job that I don't enjoy, and I'm sure there's parts of your job that you don't like.
Of course.
But in the most part, I love it. I get to do stuff like this, And a lot of people I talk to that, and Ange and a girlfriend of hers are thinking about going into business, right? And there's a bit of nervousness around that. And some people think that it's a risk to work for yourself, whereas I see it the other way. Why would I put my career and my financial destiny in the hands of somebody else? Why wouldn't I put it in the hands of myself, But I'm really intrigued to find out a little bit more about, so you're telling me you start the day off, that first 90 minutes is for yourself, and then once you've energized, so you've fueled your brain and your soul and your belly, obviously, because you like to cook yourself a good meal, and I know that you eat quite healthy, and I believe you're a vegan, is that correct? Vegetarian. And I recently had a woman on this podcast, a woman by the name of Donna Aston, who's a real cool, successful businesswoman, entrepreneur, great resilience and all this sort of stuff. And I did this 28-day program. And in 28 days, I lost 10 kilos. But not only that, my snoring stopped. My crook guts that I had for 20 years got better.
Wow.
My anxiety reduced. And funny you should say, but the stuff that you put in your mouth goes a long way to telling who you're going to become and the mood that you're in. And I was talking to another mate of mine who's in entertainment, and he works in films. He's an Australian guy who was a presenter in Australia. He's just gone overseas, and he's working on some films for Apple TV. And just before he left Australia, he was saying, Jace, the secret weapon is meditation. He goes, exercise, eat well, but mate, when you get to meditation, he goes, trust me, it's the $1 million thing. And would you sort of tend to agree with that, or?
Yeah, I've been meditating for about 10 years. I learned it from a guy in Melbourne called Steve Griffith. So it's a form of transcendental meditation. It's called Vedic meditation. And he said to me, he goes, this will be a secret weapon that you'll have for the rest of your life. And I'll just never forget him saying that, because it's true. Wherever I am, whether I'm on a plane, in an Uber, in my office, just close your eyes and you're there.
Yeah, right. I think I'm going to have to pinch your ear on that one.
Yeah.
Does Rachel meditate as well?
She does, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Excellent. So, Jaddan, before we finish up, I mean, you've shared with us a lot of insightful stuff, and you've been very honest and open and authentic with who you are, and I'm grateful as to the sharing that you've done. For some of the people that are listening today, could you give us your top 5, top 4, top 3, whatever it is, most important traits you believe that you've got in your kit bag or had to bring into your kit bag to get you, because I'm sure you didn't start with them when you were 17 years old. What are the 5 or 6 things that are most important to you that enables you to, let's call it, be successful?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, like we're obviously learning all the time, and we're making mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing we went through a stage a few years ago where we had a bunch of just culture issues, some sort of HR issues, just sort of wrong people in the wrong roles kind of stuff and causing friction. And I just called it one day. I just said, we got a leadership problem. And leadership starts with one person. It starts with the CEO. And so that was like, and people were like, nah, because everyone's trying to be nice to the boss. I'm like, no, we have a leadership problem. And yeah, that includes you, but it's more me because it's all starts at the top. So we started leadership training, and we've got this incredible leadership coach who we work with, a guy called Hamish Riddell, and we've done a lot of work on it. And we've got a plan that's going to hopefully last forever kind of thing. Like it's not just like a 12-month program. It's like, let's keep building. Let's keep building leaders. There's a guy, I'm obsessed with Jim Collins.
Yeah. Good to great.
Yeah. Actually went and saw him in Colorado last September.
Oh,
It was
cool.
like, honestly, like I've said this before, but like I met Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
But meeting Jim Collins was like I got a photo with him.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 61. He's 61 and young. That's what he said to me. Because he goes, Jaddan, what, 15 years, where are you going to be? I said, I'm 35. It's a bit hard to know. I'm getting a bit old. And he goes, Jaddan, I'm 61 and young. You're a baby. 15 years. Give me the plan. And that really stuck with me. And about to sign off on my 5-year plan, and I'll get on to the 15-year one after that. But leadership, he talks about Giorgio Paulo, who was like the Brazilian beer magnate.
Right.
And Jim talks about the Giorgio Paulo syndrome. So I think he bought Budweiser when he was like in his 80s. And I think the Budweiser people were like, so why are you buying this business? And his response was, I have so many good people that work for me. I need to give them stuff to do.
Oh, that's an awesome way of looking at the world.
The Giorgio Paulo syndrome or situation. So for me, like leadership, because it sort of then goes on to the next point, which was, why do we do what we do, right? It's not for money, because if it was for money, we would have either given up a long time ago or we would have gone into a different industry. For me, it's building careers. That's my driver, careers, because for me, that works across kind of like everything that I do, because it's whether it's working with a client like James, whether it's working with a business partner, whether it's working with a staff member, a founder of a business that we're investing in, or on myself. So if everything's centered around career development, we can all continue to move forward.
Yeah, interesting. The amount of correlations that exist between Unified and the practice, it's ironic. And we've just started a leadership program within our organisation. One of our clients, who's been a guest on this podcast, Cameron Schwab, is an ex.
Yeah, I listened to that one. It was great.
So he's working with us on leadership. And it's funny, we were having conversations about the culture in our organisation, and we had a fair idea it had to do with leadership. And then when we spoke with Cam, the light bulbs went off that maybe the buck stops with us, and we started a leadership program. And one of the things that he is helping us with is, what brand do we want to represent? So what's your individual brand? As like a brand within a brand. So what does the company or the organisation stand for? And we've done a lot of work on our purpose, and we're big on our mission statement, which is to help our clients achieve their business and personal goals through proactive service and ongoing advice. And that we, 9 times out of 10, we do that pretty well. And we're big on our why about liberating people's lifestyles, and we're big on what we stand for. But Karen was saying, what is your personal brand? And when I hear you talk about building careers, it really does. It's in sync with how I was giving you a hard time before about your meeting boy, but you're not really meeting boy. You want to spend time with people to help them be the very best that they can be.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, you spend 90 minutes on yourself to make sure that you can be the very best that you can be. You obviously work really hard on your relationship with Rachel, and you're having, eating together every night for 9 months, and you're delighted with that. With your collaborative partners, whether they're Run to the Hills boys. The Hills are alive, I'm sorry. I'm just teasing the McLaren brothers. But with the work you do with those guys, the printing business, all that sort of stuff, it's all about careers. And it sort of sits in sync, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I worked on that analogy because what then it does is, because people go, well, how do you do all these things you do? I'm like, well, it's easy. I just turn up. And build careers.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So it's just one thing. And obviously the audience changes, whether it's like 19-year-old metal band through to, a certain client, or whether it's you and I doing some work together or something like that. But yeah, it's simple. I don't have to change who I am.
Yeah. Okay, so the top three, I just want to, just so we cover these off, it's leadership, it's around building careers, and at the end of the day, Jace, you just got to turn up. Before we go, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you this question. I just like saying that just to make you a bit nervous. You've done a lot of amazing things, Jaddan. What about some of the lessons that you've learned from things that didn't go as successful? Can you draw on any of that you might want to share with us?
Yeah, of course. I think, because I've been doing this so long and had success quite young, I can say it, like, I've been patted on the back a lot. So it's easy when you're getting patted on the back to think that everything you do is great. And it's also a lot of people out there think that everything we do is great, but the reality is we've made heaps of mistakes. I think the problem with the concept of like the letting fires burn thing, there's a positive in there, but the negative is when you start to turn a blind eye. When someone comes to you and goes, "Hey, Jason," or "Hey, Jaddan, I think we've got a problem over here." And when the second you say, "I'm too busy," or "I don't want to hear negativity," or "I don't want, bring me a solution," anytime I've ever done that kind of behavior, that kind of like Shark Tank kind of like bravado bullshit that we think is the way it's meant to be, that's when 6 months later, someone's quit. We've lost $1 million. There's a unfair dismissal claim. There's so for me, it's just like actually listening and actually paying attention and not, this is to quote Jim Collins, always confront the brutal facts. Yeah. So me, Luke and Matt, every 2 months, this is a bit of a secret, but we have a brutal facts session. We get together at the beginning of the year. We went to Belgrade for the night. We just booked an Airbnb and just sat in a house and like threw shit at each other.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's confronting. It can be dangerous.
Yeah, it's awesome though.
Yeah. And you say threw shit at each other, you weren't throwing furniture around the room. It was more just like...
it's like, Jason, that way you looked at me, that really pissed me off. Yeah. No, but it's more like, hey, like, Jaddan, can you explain to me, like, I love that you're really excited about this new venture that we're doing in X market, but can you just explain to me what it's all about?
Are we doing
Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
And if by the end you haven't explained yourself properly, well, then we need to do something about it. Yeah. We did the last one on Zoom. We're doing one in a couple of weeks at the Napier Hotel, which is across the road from my house.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing for me because we implemented that because I think for a lot of years we weren't confronting the brutal facts. I went through a stage of, particularly when I was living in New York, the time zone was grueling. It was 7 o'clock at night and all of a sudden it was 9 o'clock here. And you did your best, but you're in New York City. You're also wanting to like enjoy all the restaurants and the concerts and Broadway and all these sorts of things. So all of a sudden you're cancelling some of your calls and you're being short with someone because you're trying to take a call while you're at dinner or something. So that idea of always confronting the brutal facts, I think if you can start there, then you can go a long way to sort of catching things before things go wrong.
And I think, Jaddan, as we wrap up, mate, I think just listening to you talk then, I think one of your biggest strengths, I spoke earlier from the top about your humility. I think the other thing that is quite attractive about you, platonically, don't get too excited, is your authenticity. So when I asked you that question and I was listening to the way you responded, and you said, when I turn a blind eye to, when you spoke about letting the bushfire burn, but when I turn a blind eye to a team member bringing something to my attention, when you do that, that's not congruent with who you are because you're a people person, right? And you do want to show up and you do want to give them your time. And when you're not being true to yourself or not being authentic, it sounds to me that that's when things have turned to shit.
Yep. That's a really good analogy. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I think you're spot on.
Well, you've given me 45 minutes of content. I had to give you something, bro. Hey, Jaden Comerford, you are a rock star or man behind the rock star. Unified Music Group, you and your wife, Rachel, I'd like to thank her for allowing you to come along today. Not that she gets to tell you what to do or not, but I am a little tiny bit frightened of Rachel. No, I'm not really. I'm honoured that you took the time out of your busy schedule to come and spend some time with me today and more importantly, to the people that are going to listen to this podcast. Thanks very much, mate, and keep punching, big fella.
It's my pleasure, honestly. And like whether you want to keep this or not, but the practice of being so good to us. We have our quarterly meetings with Brad, our consistency. I have my annual meeting with Matthew Morrison. Like what you guys do, you really do live up to your mission statement. So it was my pleasure to turn up today and be a part of this.
Thanks, Jaden. Appreciate it, mate.